Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this joint Franco-Dutch webinar on ecosystem dynamics and collaborative work. We're very happy to welcome a Dutch delegation here at the Cyber Campus in Paris to discuss these common issues and to see how we can work together on a national scale for the cybersecurity common needs. I will now leave the floor to Sarah Jane Mellor, who will be hosting this discussion to present the speakers and go on with the discussion.
Thank you, Amélie, and good Tuesday morning, everyone, live from a sunny Paris La Défense, as you can see, from the headquarters of the French Cyber Campus, which was inaugurated just a month ago. And as Amélie said, we have a very distinguished panel of guests today from the Netherlands and, of course, from France, as we are welcomed by the Cyber Campus. And this is a testimony of the great bilateral cooperation between France and the Netherlands. As you may know, there's been a memorandum of understanding signed between FIC and the One Conference. And this just shows the great dynamism on cyber resilience and on ties across Europe. So without further ado, I will start with Fabien Guenier from the Cyber Campus. And perhaps with a question when we talk about ecosystems, how do we bring the best of industry, government, research and civil society in a place such as the Cyber Campus?
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you today and to have you in the Conversely. Maybe to start the presentation, I will give you a few words about the Conversely. So it's not only a building in La Défense. Of course, it's 26,000 square meters to get all the best companies, or we hope the best companies in cybersecurity here, and to make them work together to rise up the awareness of cybersecurity in France. But it's not only there, it's also in all the French territory, because we want to create a network of Conversely all over France. And of course, one of the missions of the Conversely is to work with our partners in Europe. So that's why we are very, very pleased to start with you today, actually. And we've got like 4 pillars in here in Conversely. The first one is operations, which means that we will get some CSERTs and stock all here in the building, and we will have also some training in the Conversely, and we are very proud because we have the 2 first bachelor in cybersecurity, which will take place in September here in the Conversely, and we have very engaged in create a closer work between research, public research, and innovation in the building. So we have all the research like CEA, INRIA, and all the big company and startup who will work together on some dedicated topics, which we call here the Conversely, and I think we will talk a bit more about that later. And to get to the response to the question, the fourth pillar is mobilization, which means that we spend a lot of time and we have people, and it's my main mission actually, to create the ecosystem, to help the ecosystem to meet, to work, to have ideas. And we do that with by creating some, let's say, task force around topics. And the aim of those task forces are to build some commons. So let's say we've been inspired with like open source opportunities, open datas, but more than that, we want to create like resources built by the multiple companies, even if they are from public or private sectors, and to open them to help our companies to create new solutions. And maybe we'll discuss about that because it's not only for France. We think that with the commons, we can create like or foster European sovereignty. So maybe we will share on it, hopefully, as soon as possible, because we have a lot of topics to work on it. To get back to the question, after our President Emmanuel Macron had visited few cybersecurity centers, one of the main learning we get is we don't, if we want to have the ecosystem working together, we need to be in where the ecosystem is. We cannot move an ecosystem. So that's why the location has been a long discussion, but at the end, the defense was the best location for us because all the main players were already there, and they asked us to be close to them. So it is one of the questions, one of the answers we got. And the second answer is to have dedicated people to create this mobilization.
Thank you very much, Fabien. Hans de Vries, you are the director of the National Cybersecurity Center in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you can tell us a bit about the very dynamic ecosystem in the Netherlands and also the critical role of the NCSC with critical infrastructure, but not only.
Well, Sarah Jane, thank you very much for this invitation for this webinar, but also for the visit here in the Netherlands. And we're thrilled to be here and see the physical existence of coming together of the new French ecosystem, the way it was built up. And I'm very happy that I'm here with both public and private colleagues talking about cybersecurity and the way we envision that in the Netherlands and how that is played out in the Netherlands. My name is Hans de Vries. I'm the director of the National Cybersecurity Center. Within the Dutch ecosystem, we are the central hub of sharing information between the entities that know information and the ones who need it. We have a national setup of which we call hub and spoke, meaning that we share information through other sectors, sectoral or regional phases. And my colleague, Digital Trust Center, will be here talking about his role. It is very important within that ecosystem. We're trying to be the central aim of information sharing. We're also trying to make sure that the ecosystem in itself is being maintained and nurtured. That's really important. And we have a broker role to make sure that between intelligence, cybersecurity companies, non-profit entities, but also national and international, that we make sure that there is a viable and working environment, and that's really important. My NCSC is mandated at the National Cybersecurity single point of contact from a European but also an international standpoint. And ANSI is well known for you, and we are trying to work together with ANSI, but also with other organizations like Singapore, the CSA, or the CISA in the United States, or CE in Canada, or, well, Australia, Brazil. So many organizations we are working together with, and that's really important. We are an executive body, meaning that we don't make the policies. That's done somewhere in The Hague on a different level, but we're trying to make sure that that policy that is being devised is being executed by my organizations, and we cannot do it without my public and private partners.
Michel Verhaeren,
Yeah.
We just talked about agile public-private partnerships. Perhaps you can tell us about the role of the DTC in the Netherlands?
I will. Michel Verhaeren, director of the Digital Trust Center. We're not 1 month, but we're still young. We're 4 years old. We are there because the Dutch Parliament, they say we also want attention paid to non-vital organizations because they also have to take care of their cybersecurity. And that is one of the reasons we started 4 years ago with 4 people. Now we have 23 people working in our club, and it's working with a target group of 2 million companies, and they are from freelancers to bigger companies. Our mission is to make the Dutch companies cyber resilient, and that's quite a job to do. Because there are different maturity levels, and some of them are already aware but don't know exactly how to improve their security, and they are not even aware and don't have any clue to do the first steps to do. Our main task is to communicate about cyber resilience and to help the companies to find their own way. So, for example, we put a lot of attention to the action perspective, because it's also not only necessary to alarm them or to make them aware, but also to give them an action perspective that they know what to do on the different levels in the different companies. So communication, we pay a lot of attention to communication, and we're working together with a lot of intermediate organizations, because 2 million companies is too big to do by one organization or 2 or 3 organizations. So we work together with a lot of course, with NCSC, which we call our big brother, and has a lot of knowledge and already a lot of expertise. And we try to add on with our communication skills and knowledge about the target group where we're specialized in. So this is the way we're working together, and I think for this moment, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Petra Alderaan, you are the director of CyberPunk Netherlands, Cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So perhaps you can tell us about the role of your organization within the dynamic Dutch ecosystem.
Yeah, so thank you also for your invitation. It's really great to be here at the Cyber Campus today. My name is Petra Alderaan, and I'm indeed from Cyberveilig Nederland, which is a really Dutch pronunciation, but it's called like Cybersecurity Netherlands. That's our mission. And we are a branch organization, and we have about 80 cybersecurity companies who are our members. And those companies are both very small cybersecurity companies, but also very big companies like, for example, Deloitte and Accenture. Those are members of our organization. And we have actually a few goals. We were founded actually at the same time as the DTC was founded 4 years ago. The main goal actually was to make the quality of this, to improve the quality of the sector, and also make it more transparent. So one of the products, for example, that we developed was a cybersecurity dictionary, and it explains actually 600 specialistic terms, and to make it more understandable for companies who have to work with cybersecurity. But we also write, for example, buyer's guides on security testing, and those are also available in English, so maybe also interesting for this audience. And using those kind of material, we help to give more insight in what you need to do on cybersecurity. So that's one big goal. The second one is that we have a lot of knowledge in our sector, and we would like to bring this knowledge also for the greater good of the resilience in the Netherlands, and that's why we cooperate a lot with both the NCSC and the DTC. And one of the main topics that we work together on is information sharing. And it means that, we do, for example, when the NCSC has specific information that's interesting for the sector, it brings it to the sector, but we also bring a lot of information back. And that's what we've been working on for the last few years. We also do something similar with the DTC, but then it's more targeted towards, for example, when you have vulnerabilities and we have information where these vulnerabilities are, the notification can be done, for example, by the DTC. So we try to bring this information from the sector to the DTC. Those are a couple of examples that we very well work together.
Thank you, Petra. Perhaps now I'll give the floor to David. David is the CTO of Sequoia, and we mentioned the vital importance of collaborative work, and you are also the coordinator for the cyber threat intelligence working group within the Cyber Campus. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be with you today, even if it's virtually. And I'm sorry for that. I really intended to be with you physically at Conversely today, but it was not possible. So I'm the co-founder of the Sequoia, and I will give you a different perspective from what has been explained or what other people said, because I'm in the private sector, and we are a company. We are a cybersecurity editor, which develop an XDR. An XDR is a solution that is here to detect and to respond to cyber attacks. And what we need in order to detect cyber attacks is, first we need to understand what we have to deal with. That means we have to know what are the threats, how they work, what could be possible to launch as an action in front of these cyber attacks. So this is about cyber threat intelligence. And in our history, we have already shared a lot with the community, with different reports, publications, white papers, tools, etc., etc. But we have also consumed a lot from this community, and this is especially something that makes sense for cybersecurity industry. Is that when you have to think about threat intelligence, is something that need to be shared between people which will produce this threat intelligence and people which will consume that. And this is exactly what was the goal of the initiative at CyberPunk with this working group. The goal was to federate different companies, different people willing to create a common, a threat intelligence common that will allow to break silos, existing silos, I would say, because in the past and even today, a lot of companies are spending a lot of time to create this kind of structured intelligence, and each one will do that at its own level. And if we can mutualize that, if we can federate that, that will make sense for the whole community. And this is exactly what we try to do at CyberPunk in this working group.
Thank you, David. Perhaps back to you, Fabien. So what would you say are the strong suits, characteristic, and really the signature strength of this ecosystem? And
what we see here is like everybody is very engaged in creating let's say a safer digital space, and because of that, like said David, a lot of companies are engaged to break the silo, and doing that, we propose to our members to work on what we call already the commons. So we have, like you start with some creating some dictionaries on some new technologies. So we are working today on some specifications for what are the main cyber attacks on blockchain and crypto technologies. We did the same on AI, just to prove that AI can have an interest for cybersecurity. So we are glad to maybe say in the few next week that we will have a platform dedicated to AI for cybersecurity. And with that, we have like each time around the table at least 4 different type of let's say group. What I didn't say yet, that's the governance of the campus CyberPunk is based on 9 college, which is in each one has a specific type. So we have the industrials, we have the research, the training, SMEs, startups, and we have 9 colleges like this. And all these colleges, they will elected 1 representative who will get a seat at the board of the campus cyber. By that way, the campus cyber is the reflection on what the company wants. And that's, I think, the main point of the Campus Cyber, that is a reflection on what the ecosystem needs and wants to do. And what we have on the work group is the same. So all this way of building this adventure is based on trust and on transparency. So those two factors, from my point of view, is putting the Campus Cyber as a third trust party, where the companies are willing to share some, not all the secrets, but share more than what they do before. Because they say, here we will share all a bit more than other spaces, so we can go further together in terms of what technology we can share, and if we can create some new resources together. So for me, is the main point of what could be, let's say, because we are very young, so what could be one of the success, and we start to feel it, that companies are able to really play or try this new way of building solutions around the ecosystem.
Thank you, Fabien. Perhaps, hence in the Netherlands, you have this so-called expression of the polder model, the consensus-oriented approach, and how you always get everybody seated at the table, hash differences, but at the end come up stronger. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about how this applies to the cybersecurity landscape and how it's good for the Netherlands. And
okay, well, thank you very much. A very interesting question. And talking about what we call the polder model, which means that there is a decentralized government, and there's the decentralized way of working within the Netherlands. Also, we have a shared responsibility approach. The third, we are very pragmatic. And the fourth, we understand that it has to be in a public-private participation. And I'll go in each one of the fours. If you look at from a decentralized government, we don't have one entity who says, I'm the boss. It doesn't work that way within the Netherlands. If I would say that, then 7 people would say, oh yeah, are you? So there would be a little bit of discussion. It's not like my approach from the French is that Paris decides of how things work. That's not the way it works in the Netherlands. We have to, sometimes I envy the ANSI because they can really say, this is the way it should go forward. I wish my organization could say that. And within the NIS2, which is coming now, we might have some extra push beyond all the free possibilities to really enforce more. So that's a very interesting part. But in essence, we have a decentralized way of working. But to coming with that, we definitely feel there's a shared responsibility. And that's very strong in the Netherlands. And I believe that because of the shared responsibility, people are much more willing to help because they understand that if I take this part of this dike and I'm looking at this part, but you are looking at that part, together we're looking at the whole dike, making sure that we're protected against water, because that's the way it came forward. You could only see so much within your eyesight, and other people had to look at the other part. So that's the way it started from the 12th century. Also, we are able to quickly organize a community working together. And I think we've stated that and showed the world when we approached the Log4j incident in December. We were very quickly in bringing together people. We noticed that there was a big incident coming in on Friday. On Saturday, we decided, and on the Sunday, we had 2 meetings with public and private organizations, 300 different organizations together, deciding how we would act together on Monday. So it was very quickly. We created the GitHub, and where we would bring together all the knowledge for what kind of applications were vulnerable because of the Log4j. And I know that almost every country used our GitHub approach and our GitHub entity as the single truth of Log4j. And that's solely because we could work very quickly together with public and private entities, bringing every knowledge together, because that's really important. It's very practical as well. We know, even though I could grow big and big and big and get a lot of people, I still would not be able to have all the knowledge inside my organizations. That's impossible. So we have the pragmatic approach is, I know you know a lot, whether it's a public entity or a private entity, but we know how it works, share that information so everyone benefits. That's really important for us. Therefore, public-private partnerships is in our DNA. We understand how that works. And I envy the big approach that came with the Cyber Campus, because it's really grown very quickly within 2.5 years, something like that. I'm jealous in that sense, because we are looking into, can we create such a building? How many hurdles will we have to come over? And so we'll see about that. And I would call it the House of Cyber, meaning everyone can have a room, but we're in one roof, making sure that everyone stays together, dry and clean, making sure that you use the same kitchen to build up new ideas and create a safe environment for the Netherlands. I'm really thrilled of going and look to this building and how that will come about, because that vision will come with us to the Netherlands.
A House of Cyber, something to look forward to. Michel, about what we can learn from each other and about the specific strength of the Netherlands as an ecosystem.
Yeah, we have two tasks as digital tourism. One is information and advice, and the challenge is how to reach to so many companies. And we start with, of course, we have a website, etc. And this website last year, 200,000 companies were visiting it. So it's becoming a known within our target group that you can find information, relevant information, but also tools if you want to be busy with cyber resilience. A second approach we choose is to make more cooperation between all companies. Sometimes they are regional organizations, sometimes they are more branch-oriented groups of companies who also have as main objective to work to improve their cyber resilience. We started with 6 in the first year, and now we have 45 groups of companies working together with their own members, but also learning from each other. For example, some of them are oriented at SMEs and are using students as students can visit the companies and can help the first helping with the first steps. And then they again can grow up in professionality in their way. And also we have a community, which now it's more than 1,000 members, and that are more mature members. They know something about IT, but still want to are looking for new information, want to share, want to taste other information. Also, I think an important thing, how to reach people, and it's they're only coming to that community because they think there's something in for me, and that's why they come in, and that's why it can grow, because there is a lot of need to information, and everybody's looking, and we also use the information already exists with the NCSC, so that we don't double information, but are using existing information and experience of NCSC, and that makes it also going more quickly than if we were doing it only in our way. So the cooperation, it's also of the polar model, but also very pragmatical. It helps a lot.
Thank you, Michel. Petra, perhaps to add to this.
I think what my colleagues already mentioned is that cooperation and a pragmatic approach is really important. But I think I want to add that we also did a lot of learning in the last few years. So when we had a couple of years ago the big incident around Citrix, and what we saw in that period is that all companies and public organizations were doing their own job in the best way they could, but there was little cooperation at that point. So from then on, we learned that, well, since the threat landscape changes a lot and it gets more complicated, that we need to get more organized also on the defense part. And that means that you really need close cooperation between public and private parties. And what I also see is that the culture within the private sector has changed a lot. So, for example, when a couple of years ago, most cybersecurity companies said, I want to sell my threat intelligence. And of course, there's still a business model around threat intelligence. There are now more companies who say, okay, that's maybe not such a good of a business model for us anymore. It's more important that we do a quickly sharing of threat intel. And then we get also more threat intel back, and then we can improve the protection for our clients. So there's also from the private sector more willingness to share information and to do a close cooperation. And as Hans said, I was very proud when we did the Log4j handling at the end of last year, and we were indeed able to reach so many private companies within, well, overnight actually. So we already have platforms in place and communication platforms, and we have a way to reach the sector within a couple of hours and have them at some Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. Well, I was very proud that we had about 60 of our members present in those meetings. So that shows how we already are but we also are good in learning and improving the cooperation, and also that the information sharing is now really, well, as a big challenge in front of us, and we see it also as a means to improve the resilience.
Thank you. David, perhaps on the CTI and how you organize your work within the working group, and how is it really drawing those cyber commons we talked about?
When we started this working group, so with the different Campus Cyber members, I think there are about 30 members part of this working group. We defined what was important for us. As you may know, if you speak about cyber threat intelligence, you can mention different or think about different things. It can be technical threat intelligence, it can be strategic threat intelligence. So you can do different kind of production that will make sense. We had to define what we really wanted to have as a final deliverable. So we organized this working group in two different tracks. The first track was an operational track in order to define what was the goal. So what should we have at the end as deliverable? What would be the methodology that we might use? So here we can speak about what are the TLPs? Should we keep the source of the information? What is the format that we will use, etc., etc. The second step is the tooling aspect, the different solutions that will be used in order to make sure everyone uses the same stack, the same techno stack, so that we can have an information that will make sense at the end. And on the second track, we speak about governance. We speak about the way to govern this command. Who should access to this command? Is there specific rules before you are able to produce or to inject a specific content into it? So we organized this working group with these two tracks and different steps that makes a lot of sense. We really placed each step one after the previous one that would make sense for the next one. We were on the first operational step, when we define what we want to have at the end. We listed five goals. The first one is really to I took the expression before to break the silos, but it's really here to do that. The first goal is really to make in a single place everything that is related with open source intelligence, threat intelligence. This is the kind of thing that everyone will do in its specific expert teams individually, and we will place in the common in this common campus cyber common this open source intelligence modeling. This is very important because if we can do that in a single place, we will really optimize the number of resources that are required at the country level in order to structure this open source intelligence. So we really have an effective, a very interesting ratio in order of resource optimization. If one guy can do that for, let's say, 10 companies, I will optimize 9 experts who will be able to use their time into other specific cybersecurity activities. So we organized that in order to produce 5 different kind of things. So the first one is about OSINT modeling. The second one is about specific, let's say, regular reports about what's going on in terms of cybersecurity activity. The third one is you previously talked about Log4j. This is exactly the same case. When we have to deal with specific ephemeral or contextual activity, we want that the group can federate the resources in order to share faster, easier, better, different kind of information that will make sense for them. This is especially true today, relating with the context we have with the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, in which some part of this group are working together to share information about it. The first one is the ability to share information about security incidents in a safe place in which the information will be preserved. And the last one is about telemetry. Is the ability to concentrate or to collect sightings from specific members in order to observe what's going on into different industries and to measure if, let's say, a specific trend or a specific attack really exists or is launched on a specific target or industry. So this is what we have defined and how we proceed in terms of achievement in this working group.
Already there, or is he building it?
It's building. It's already. How long has the working group been in place, David?
I think it has started almost 1 year ago, and we have, as I said, we have different steps. So we progress. When we have finished one steps, we collectively agree that the first step is finished, and now we switch on the next one, etc., etc. And we can, let's say, estimate that the working group will come to an end when we'll have reached the 3 operational steps, and when we will have a global governance level that will define how this security command will be governed, of course.
Thank you, David. So we talked about the dynamic threat landscape and how we need to be collectively faster, better, stronger. We saw also in the chat that there were questions about how things are being organized in other EU member states. Perhaps, and we mentioned also NIS2 coming up. So do we see a growing EU culture of cybersecurity and cyber resilience, Fabien? And what would you say are those building blocks? Like a meeting like this, bilateral cooperation are some of the seeds we need to plant.
Yeah, so we see that. We see at European scale also some initiative from the European Commission, and I think especially to the EDA-AH, which we should become one of them for the Conversely, and we will work as a corridor with 12 other countries to share cybersecurity practices towards SMEs and public administrations. So this is a way of doing this, and because we are the building is new and we invite everybody to come here. We have you but we met also the financial cert of Italy, which came to discuss with French cert to start to build relationship, and we know that they are doing the same. We have some discussions also with Luxembourg to maybe let's say have a share the cyber range for at the European level for trainings, exercise. So what we need mainly is what we do with David, and thanks to all the work he does, is like to meet together and having meetings. I think start to understand where we can share things, and even if it starts slowly, I think to build this relationship it's very good, because I think at from my point of view and from the Campus point of view, we need to defend the sovereignty of cybersecurity for Europe. So we really need to meet, spend time together, and even if you are quite young, much younger than your organizations, we are very keen to work with you and try to find the first steps we can do together and to start to think at a European scale.
Yes, EDIH, the European Digital Innovation Hub. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And perhaps this Europe in action. At the moment, we have the French presidency of the EU Council. We'll have FEAC, which is a landmark event in June. The One Conference in October, of course. Hans, what do you think are the building blocks of this more cyber secure, cyber resilient Europe?
As a member of the executive board of ENISA, I feel for already a long time that cybersecurity has no boundaries. It goes everywhere at the same time. So we might have an incident in the Netherlands, but the way it's solved is through Japan and Brazil, for instance. So you have to look much further than your own physical boundaries. Working together within Europe, if you look at from a more political scheme mechanism, it's really important to work together. And you can also see it on a non-cyber part, looking at the war in Ukraine. Cooperation together within Europe is extremely important. If I go back to the way that's set up in the Netherlands, we have what we call ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers. We have already for a long time. And you also see now that on a European scale, that's being built and being supported by ENISA to make sure that for certain sectors, you can work together over companies and over European borders. If you look at the space agencies, there are just a few scattered around within Europe, and they have to work together. If you look at aviation, it's the same, even though it's fierce competition, but you try to avoid competition on cybersecurity. That's really important. And yes, you could make money with threat intel, but it's much better not to do so, but make money in the progress in solving problems within organizations. That's much better. So my personal view is that from a public perspective, we work together with both intelligence communities. We're not part of the intelligence, but we work very close together with both the general and the military intelligence. We work very close together with prosecution and national police. We work together with the computer emergency response teams in each country. So we have the European CSIRT community, where 27 are combined, talking about cybersecurity and warning each other of what's happening. And that's really growing day by day. And my team, who is here as well, they're working vigilantly to make sure that cybersecurity within the European space is really, really important. What I did not mention before, and I want to stipulate that, my organization, if there is a cold phase, everyone is doing their own bit, But when there is an incident or a crisis, they all look at me, frankly, because then they, not personally, of course, but they look at the NGO cybersecurity for advice and guidance and an approach on a national scale, because we do the operational crisis coordination. So within our polar model, we understand that when the shit hits the fan, we call it, then someone has to take on the guidance. And then it's really important to understand that the cooperation with other public entities and the private entities fully understand that it can only work if you work together when you have met before in the cold phase, and you can call each other by night and understand this is an organization to be trusted, the information is to be trusted, we have to act on it right away, and that's the way it works within the Netherlands. But it goes over borders as well. We have organizations within the Netherlands who give support and products and services to other countries. So if there is an incident within the Netherlands for that company, it will affect Germany, France, Luxembourg, Estonia, might. We have a very large internet hub, the AMSIX, extremely important for almost everyone in the world. So if that has a hiccup, you will notice. So there is definitely a very big approach. And my organization primary focuses on the central government and critical infrastructure, but the critical infrastructure is really growing. So we have to make sure that the approach is really being helpful, and critical and non-critical in essence, it changes because of the, how do you say that? The supply chain. We know, for instance, that if the transport is being blocked, goods will not come to shops to sell, or oil will not be supported to companies that need the diesel, for instance, for their generators when there is an incident. So everything is connected. And so the emergent EU culture is to really protect our environment, to really take hold of that, to make sure that everything keeps on working. And now we've seen that Ukraine is part of the EU energy grid. So when there's a hiccup there, we have to act. So it's really, really important to really take this by heart and make sure that within our European environment, where there is so many dependencies over countries, that keeps on working.
Yeah, interdependencies and the critical value of trust.
Yes, it's
in our
so
ecosystem. Michel, about this growing EU culture.
Yeah, I think what I see is that there's a lot of willingness to share information across the borders. We also, as young organizations, we had already contact with different countries who want to share and want to learn from each other. And we also have to learn a lot, because we don't know what will happening within a few years, and we have to learn together. So that's also the reason I'm very glad I can be here and see what's happening here. And I will go back with inspiration and I will build on it further. I think it will take some more time when you look at the governance or organization, because every country has some national priorities or some own culture, which makes a difference how it has been organized. But that's maybe not the main issue, because you can still work together if you are working on a different department, or having some other contract between public and private that we may be used to. Still, there is a lot of willingness to work together. And what I see is that it's more and more easy to find each other. And that's what we're doing. You are doing it already for some more years. And what we all will do to learn, and that from other countries who have good ideas which we can reuse.
Yes. Petra?
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of things have already been said, but I think it's also important to stress that if you are going to expand to the European level, you also have to already develop some basic principles to make information sharing possible. And we talked already about trust. Well, trust is already quite difficult. How do you decide which trusted community in the Netherlands can share information if you would make this broader and put this onto a European level, then you have to make a definition on what is trust then, and which organizations can be allowed in this community. But also you have to solve issues like quality. It's also concerns trust. How can you trust the quality of information? So maybe you have to think about the formats of information that you share. For example, if you here in France would store information on incidents in one way, and in the Netherlands we might decide to do this differently, and in the end we like to share, then well, you have a problem. So I think when we see that the next step is going to be a scale up to a European level, we should already start today in seeing if we can compare these kind of principles on the more local level and put them together and see if we can agree to maybe have similar approaches. And I think that's also a good topic to discuss later, maybe today during our visit, but I think we should start today on working in order to maybe next year be able to share more information.
Yes.
Because your remark is really spot on. And my question to you, David, is how do you take that into account that you will have international organizations that you share information with or you get information from? So it needs international standards to share, because otherwise it will be fruitless in the end if we would like to cooperate, but we have a different approach, or with Luxembourg or United States or you name it. So what kind of international standards did you use to make sure? Is it sticks and taxi? Is it a different approach? Is it security text? What kind of basic did you use to make sure that the building blocks are universal? Because it's open, as you said. How open is it?
Yes, this is a very good question, because we need to have something that is based on standards, on international standards, in order to be used by everyone, even if it's outside our group, because it's always the future of something to extend what is initially in let's say a first boundary. So this is based on sticks taxis. The answer is yes. We also considered other standards, norms, or way to proceed with the specific information modeling. In what we have done in our, let's say, methodology step is to identify different kind of international standards that would make sense. This is where we talk about sticks taxi, and we decided which of them would be kept at the end in order to be placed into this way to create this threat intelligence. And the point is that, and it makes sense, the more the standard is known or renowned or good, the highest, the most it would have been selected as an interesting feature for this approach. But we really need to have this, let's say, standardized way of thinking in order to share information. Otherwise, it will be the information flow will be stopped somewhere, because we will not be able to speak between, let's say, a point A and a point B. So we need to have something that is smooth, that is based on international norms, standards, to do so. And I think that, and this is very important, we have designed this initiative in Campus Cyber. For us, the goal is to have something that makes sense at the national level. But I would say, and Fabien talked about it, the goal of Campus Cyber is to create something that will extend let's say, the distribution of the commons outside France. And I think this is especially true for this, let's say, threat intelligence commons. Everything that can be shared to the partners, that should be done. And at my perspective, I think that this Ukrainian war has shown us that it is important to speak as a single voice in Europe. And everything that could be identified as an interesting common should be shared at the European level. And this is especially true for this threat intelligence topic.
Thank you very much, David. Amélie, do we already have some questions? So perhaps before you send us in your questions, we have one last round.
I can answer that.
Okay. So hello from Geneva. Hello, Geneva. Is there any collaboration between the EU and Switzerland?
My estimate, yes, there is, because there is what we call a European government search, and Switzerland is part of that. So there is definitely cooperation between the Netherlands, European entities, and Switzerland. So that's a clear yes.
Thank you, Hans. Do we have other questions in the chat, Amélie? Or
I'm going to check in the chat. Please don't hesitate to send your questions directly into the questions tab at the right-hand side of your screen, so it's easier for us to see them. Let me see in the chat. There's a lot of emphasis on sharing information between public, private, and working together with so many different member states, countries, organizations, which is different. How can we ensure that protecting the interests of some will not be detrimental to others, and whether information shared could not be used to get market advantages against the advantages of others? That's a good question. Who wants to respond to this?
Well, I can try and make a response, because this is, of course, what we are discussing too in the Netherlands, because this is really a big challenge. So, and this is also a discussion that the private sector has with the public sector, because you don't want to give specific advantages to certain commercial players who are in this information sharing. And how we look at it from a Dutch point of view is that we try to make, let's say, criteria that are objective, that define which organizations could be participating in such a cooperation, and to make it open enough and make it scalable enough for a lot of organizations to participate. But you still have to balance this. What helps is that some organizations, they don't even want to have a cooperation, so they just work for themselves. Others would love to cooperate, so they are more active. So at this moment, we don't have a discussion in the Netherlands that some of the organizations feel that they want to participate and are not allowed to. And at this moment, we are able to make objective criteria. So, for example, we have some cooperations where we do pilots, where we work together with only the companies who have incident response and monitoring capabilities, because they only have the data and other organizations don't, to bring in and to share. But the results, for example, of analysis, we try to distribute them broad, so that more organizations can gain on the information that comes out. So it is it's a real challenge, and we're not going to have it solved either on the short term, but we try to find a way, and we do pilots to see if it's going to cause a real problem in the future or not. And of course, we have a lot of discussions, and that was what I was thinking too when this question came up, is that we didn't talk a lot about legal constraints, but we do have a lot of those constraints in the Netherlands. You probably have them in France as well. So we also try to find a way to do this collaboration and still comply, for example, to the GDPR. Because, when we talk about sharing IP addresses, and I'm sure if this is the same here in France, we do have difficulties in sharing this kind of information. So one of the solutions sometimes is also to say, okay, if we just leave this kind of information out, is there other information that does not have those constraints that we can share? So, and this is where our pragmatic nature comes back. So instead of saying that there are too many difficulties to start, we try to find a subset where we think, okay, this part we can handle, we start a pilot, and then when the pilot works out, then we can work from there. And this is how we, step by step, build our ecosystem. And I think that's an approach that really works, because if we are here in the front and we are considering all the legal constraints that we have, we would not start sharing any information at all. So we try to start where we, with the portion of information that we can share, and try to build from there.
Yeah, we are very close actually in the way we do, and it makes me smile because I think we have a cultural way of doing things in France that we need to overcome a bit in that kind of topics. So David can testimony on that. What we used to say now for the Conversely is we try to define the minimum common denominator,
exactly,
and to start. And it takes quite a time in France to say we won't solve all the system. We'll start with something small, but in which we can grow up. So this is what we do in our working group. So the minimum denominator, and basically what we are asking to the companies and public sector who are working on the topic is to think about the governance for their own building blocks, or like this they can discuss about business models and all the IP questions. And we are quite happy because we just started a new mission around the topic of the IP. We would like to create for France a kind of new, let's say, a set of law or contract around commons, because actually in France we don't really have anything that's has been specifically made for commons. So we are in a space where everything has to be built. So we have two lawyers will work the next few months on these topics to create, let's say, a positive set of rules around commons. And we don't know how we'll manage it yet, because all the questions you ask will be in question. But in most of the working group we are, even if it's going well, for AI, for CTI, we are at a step or at the edge of going to the production, and all the company are asking, give us, let's say, a legacy, the right rules to manage our IP. Otherwise, we won't share our data, we won't share our technologies. So if we don't overcome this topic, we won't be able to go at the end. So we are quite happy to push on this direction for the commons actually.
It's really interesting, because what triggered me was that on the 23rd of February this year, 2022, a new international coalition has been started. It's called the Non-Profit Cyber Coalition. It's all, I think it's 44 different international organizations that have combined the forces to really push forward building awareness and building effectiveness of sharing on a non-profit base. And the Global Cyber Alliance is part of that. There's so many different organizations part of it. It's really interesting also for France to look into, because what you see is that we try to push the envelope, that not only from a pragmatic point of view, what can we share and how can we do that, but also from more above, that you try to avoid that the cyber threat intel is exclusive and shared on a one-on-one basis because there is power or money involved. Now we try to make sure that it's free, that it's available for everyone and everyone to share, but also use to protect yourself and to protect your users and to protect, and therefore, your environment. So I'm fully for a non-profit approach as much as possible. So the information that we receive from a national point of view has to be shared to everyone that can be reached, and we do that specifically through the Digital Trust Center, but also through the commercial entities that work together to really make sure that the important stuff comes to the organization who can act on it as quickly as possible. And in the Netherlands, we're not there yet because of logistic issues, but especially judicial issues that we really sometimes hamper with that. But my goal is to really push forward and really go for that. And I think at the end of this year, we will definitely have made a lot of strides in that point. But I always try to focus on how can, on a non-profit base, make sure that we can really make a great approach. And it doesn't mean that you can make a venue or make an organization. The FIC 1 conference is to really have 2 conferences bringing together knowledge and really look in the strengthening of those environments. And I saw a question where can other or countries take part? The reason why we're here is because FIC and the 1 conference are combining strength. And I'm not sure whether Denmark has a conference or other organizations have a conference. So that's a different approach than you have from a country perspective. Let's say that I talk with ANSI, or I talk with BSI or the NCC UK or with the Austrian. That's a different entity. But in the end, I'd like to have make sure that both private and public can really work together to create a safe, free, safe and global internet usage that's free for all. And that's really important.
Yeah, maybe to add a little bit about what we find out is that the IT companies and the cybersecurity companies really want to work together with the government. And they're not afraid of their business model, etc. But they think, oh, no, we have some information. We think it must be used. We will not do it because it's not our client, and we can give it to the government and they can take care of this information. And also, if we are now notifying a lot of companies and telling them there's something wrong with your IT system, but we don't help them. We don't give incident responses. That's where we stop as DTC, because then the company itself has to do its job, and then he can decide to do it by himself or include an IT company or cybersecurity company. So that's the way it's now done, and I think the most IT companies, as far as we know, and cybersecurity are very glad that it's working this way and helping even them in getting a more aware, clients group in their country. So that's the way it works for us, and we hope to improve and increase it.
David, do you want to add some things to that, or?
Just as an illustration, in our working group, we have a different kind of organization. We have public organization, private organizations. Some are large groups, some are SMEs, some are just CTI consumers, and some are CTI specialists used to produce and create threat intelligence. So we have a variety of different people around threat intel. The point is that everyone is interested to have this threat intelligence common. So of course, with this different approach, we have different use cases. And we can think that if we do not agree, some will benefit from the work of others, and we need to align that. So on what Fabien said just before, we need to define the first step. The first step is what everyone accept to place in this common area, and you can define. This is you are the owner of the information that you will place in this common. So you can decide whether or not you want to propose this threat intelligence to be placed in a central zone. So for me, this is really about a company decision to accept if they want to bring this specific sensitive TLP information into the central place or not. And the or not can make sense because depending on the sensitivity of the information, the source of the information, or the way the information has been collected, it might not be a good idea to place it in the central zone and to keep it for specific investigation, for, let's say, legal investigation or military intelligence. So you can have good reason to not place everything into a central zone. The point is that in terms of volume, most of what is done today should be shared and should be shared as much as possible. And this is the first step, but this first step is, let's say, the most important, because you have a lot of return of investment with this just first step.
Maybe to add to this, the view of the commons we build here is of course the common itself is a non-profit, because we won't do something that going to be in a concurrence with other parties. But we think that with a common, it might help companies to create new revenue sources or new values, like the fifth use case has been presented by David, where you can get a better telemetry on what's going on internet. So what we asked to the lawyers to think about a kind of reciprocity set of rules, which says that if you give this, you will get a counterpart, which is like more value on data, or let's say some premium access. So we are not totally on the non-profit way of thinking. We are more on the how to share and spread the value created by the way of sharing.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Because in the Netherlands, we have a lot of discussions that companies are willing to give information only if they get also information back. So it has to go in both directions. So this means that you have to make perhaps some rules that when companies are only listening to the information but never add, that you might get them disconnected. Do you have similar issues here in France when discussing this topic?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Or not cut, maybe they have to pay a full price, because the common has to live by itself also. So it won't get any benefits, but it has to be to live. So maybe.
So then your price is maybe higher when you don't.
For example.
Bring back.
But it's again, it's the governance of the common will decide. We just let's investigate what is the best way, and the companies who are the most involved will decide what they are sharing. And maybe what we saw that with the common, maybe new values are coming, and maybe this new source of value, like telemetry, is maybe shared with only few actors. Yeah. But if you lost it, maybe for the future of the evolution of your company, it's a big deal. But that's what we are trying to do, because all the company needs to also improve their, like you said, and maybe shift their business model. And we think that the commons might help them to go faster.
Yes, so before we wrap up with one final question from me to all the participants, maybe we can take a few other questions from the chat. I see the one on top might be directed to you, Hans, if you...
Which one?
I don't know, the one from Warsaw. We have a very dynamic EU chat today. Hello from Warsaw. Is there a risk of competition between EU agencies, institutions, and national services in charge of cybersecurity that could undermine information sharing?
Well, I fully understand it. If you look at it from a European approach and also from a country approach, there is national security involved, which means that you have to protect your physical entity and also your digital footprint within the world for your country. So there is definitely an approach that intelligence services, but also prosecution, because they have a certain approach and the legal boundaries of where they can do their research, is that they look from a Dutch environment perspective. And it also is from sometimes economic benefit once you see what is happening. So there are definitely different rules and regulations are involved. On the other hand, my approach is that even though I fully understand there are national security entities and you really have to make sure that it works together, the spillover to other countries is enormous. So you have to take into account that that spillover is there. There is no physical boundary that stops an incident. So there is a blurry combination about EU institutions, EU services, EU necessities of sharing information, world necessities to share information, in a part to the national security point of view, which is as crucial as well at the same time. So it's a difficult trade-off in that sense. My perspective is that I think every country, looking at, for instance, what's happening in Ukraine and with all the different incidents that has been here going on since 2014, we understand that if there is an incident somewhere, it will have an enormous effect in the rest of the world. So you need to work together as soon as possible. And the intelligence services do so. So there is definitely a full understanding that you have to work together. It will also mean that toezicht, what's the English word for inspection? Inspection will be much stronger the coming years because of the NIS2. And personally, I think that's a good thing, because there are too many organizations that still think that having only one barrier and wall is enough in this digitized world, which is not. So you really have to step up, gorge your loins, as they call it, make sure that you're strengthened, that you use multi-factor authentication, that you have set up an offline backup mechanism, because if ransomware kicks in, you have nothing left. You really have to have your basic principles fixed now. We are working together to make sure that each company, big or small, understand that they really have to take those principles. And we even talk with large organizations, and we call it large help small, because they're in their supply chain. So you cannot deal with it by a legal point of view. You have a problem. No, the problem hits you as well. So you have to work together prior to make sure that the whole chain is safe, and not only your part of the chain. The chain is just as strong as the weakest link, as they call it. So you have to make sure that the whole chain is good, making sure that from a certain perspective, from a supply chain, you need to work together over the whole chain, meaning you need to work together. And that's from a company point of view, but also from a national point of view.
And here you see that the private sector does not only wait for new regulations to come by, but they take action themselves. And we do have a lot of initiatives where the bigger companies give advice to their suppliers, but also put more constraints to them when it comes to cybersecurity. So I think that's a very good example where there is both activity from a public point of view, but also from a private point of view.
Could I add one thing, because we were talking about cooperation, necessity of cooperation, and we'd also talk about necessity of trust. Trust is important. And what I think we didn't emphasize it enough, is part of trust is you have to know each other. You have to know, and maybe sometimes you have to like each other. But then you are willing to share information, and that's why I'm glad that we are here together, but also on other tables, the different European people are meeting each other and have even social activities to learn each other better. And it works really that way, because in Holland we also have to improve connections, relations, etc. And it helps really much is, for example, if Hans and I are driving 5 hours from The Hague to Paris, and we had a lot of quality time to discuss all kind of concrete opportunities to work together. And we can ask every question to each other because it's an open conversation. And that works, and we still have 5 hours to go back. So that really gives an impulse for our cooperation.
Initiatives start from this trip.
I fully agree. Only by meeting and talking, you will understand, and therefore, in the end, trust. And it takes a lot of time. It's hard work. And it goes cross-border. And so sometimes if you look at from a cybersecurity point of view, I see so many opportunities, but I also see when you look at the tension in the world at the moment, I see so many threats at the same time because we stop talking. It's really, really dangerous.
Yes, the virtue of dialogue, and this is an ongoing conversation, and we'll have the next round at FIC and the One conference. Perhaps one last question from me, because I don't think Amélie is in the chat, but I don't think, right?
I don't think you have time for one question.
No, okay. So, but I think we've already answered it partially. What can France learn from the Dutch ecosystem, maybe to wrap up? And what can the Netherlands learn from France? Maybe we heard the House of Cyber, we heard the Polder model that sometimes, yeah, France would love such a setup. Shall I start with you, Fabien?
Yeah, I think I just saw.
So we get one lesson from him, 3 lessons to you.
No, I won't give any lessons to you, but I was very interested about the way you said that for the Log4j crisis, you went so fast to respond it.
And I think there is something we should maybe try to in crisis time, how we can put all the main, or not main, but all the actors together to have a response that fast as you described. That's I'm very interesting to understand how you get to that point where in few hours, days, you can get everybody's working together. And the other thing we're trying to do here is the location, physical location, and we will get a bar to have drinks and discuss more topics. And I fully agree that we need, as a human being, we need to meet, to discuss, and I think we will create a lot of meetings, dynamics, socializing time to create this trust, having those informal conversation where I think this is where you start to understand and meet some people. And I will spend more time to create this area of trust. I think it's very needed. And we see from the end, not totally the end, but because now we can get back to work with the end of the COVID, that for some work group, just the fact that being together 2 hours and working together, everything is easier and go faster. And there's no listen, but I'm really keen to come to your place next time and to continue and try to find some opportunities to work together and with other countries too, because I think I'm quite new in cybersecurity areas, but it seems like everybody wants to solve this issue of digital safety. So.
David?
I think the Netherlands has succeeded in creating a culture of trust much more than what we have in France today. And I have the feeling that this is especially true when it comes to information sharing, because you're on this topic since longer than France is. You have these different ISACs initiatives to coordinate specific industries, and I think we have similar things in France, but it's not as structured, as organized as it is in the Netherlands. And on these specific topics, we might share more. We might collect maybe feedbacks or ideas that have been used in the past to make it actionable in order to unlock everything that could be a fear about trust relationship. And I think Netherlands has started it before France. So we should identify, see, and collect the good points or difficult points on which were on your journey, so that we can learn about it.
Petra?
Yeah, well, I think that we can learn also a lot from France. One of them, well, you already said that informal networks are really important. I recently interviewed a lot of organizations in the Netherlands about how information sharing is actually working. And they all say that the informal contacts are actually what's the main deal in sharing information. And that means that at least we need a clubhouse too. So a cyberspace or a house of cyber, I don't know how we should call it, but so we need something similar. And I think, well, you mentioned the Paris point of view. I think we might need some more centralized governance as well, because, well, the good thing about our polder model is that we have a lot of local initiatives and that and a pragmatic view that moves forward quite quickly. On the other hand, then you get also a lot of distributed initiatives, and sometimes we miss the glue to put it centrally together. And I think that we can learn from France, because this is, well, how you put this cyber campus here in place. I think we can have some of that energy and bring that back to the Netherlands and maybe try something similar as well.
Michel?
Yeah, I think the most things are said now, what we can learn from each other. So I don't want to add anything, only to, I hope this will continue our talks. And we still have to learn, and we both, I think, have to learn, and we will learn from each other.
Hans, le mot de la fin?
Well, first and foremost, I really like how France have thought big on this approach. And I really am proud of how much ground you've made to really create this physical space that makes possible that you can work together after this post-COVID time. And it's really important that the building is there to really stride forward very fast. What we both can learn is how we can go from that central spot here in La Défense to different regions within France, or similarly from The Hague to different regions in the Netherlands. And that move from a centralized mechanism to regional or sectoral is very difficult. So we can both learn from that approach, how we can do that. And so I'm really looking forward to take that journey together. And David, your approach of the cyber threat intel is extremely interesting for us, because we're looking at the same things from an open space as well. But if we take a different direction, in the end, we will not meet. So that's also a learning point for the future, is say, okay, what are the objectives? What are the basic principles that you've seen? Do we use the same parts? Why not? Things like that is really important, because we're actually working on those different mechanisms as well. And I think the other thing that we can really both learn from is how to approach the GDPR and look at cybersecurity as not only an adventure, but also as a possibility to really make a good mark within the world. As you might be aware, that the GDPR has really set a standard. And I think that an NIS2 with the checks and balances that comes within can also be a big standard for the rest of the world at the same time. So I'm really looking forward to really build that forward from a Europe perspective. And we can learn from every step that we take. And I'm really looking forward to lunch with wine. And
this we can do. Well, upon those wise words, thank you all very much here and remotely for your time and participation. As you know, FIC will take place on the 7th, 8th, and 9th in Lille in the Grand Palais. In the meantime, you have the fabulous INCYBER online magazine for shared topics. And the One Conference will take place on the 4th and 5th of October in The Hague. And I think the call for project was just launched last week. So more online, and until next time, bye-bye, take care, be safe.
Thank you all. Thank you, David.
Bye. Bye-bye.